Russell, I'd like a question. Paul, you've said that in order to that the new moral imperative has to be consideration of the environment before, or the biosphere or whatever, before self. This is a conference really focused on the Millennium Development Goals, and I'm wondering whether you can extrapolate to the other Millennium Development Goals like maternal health and so on. I mean, I assume what you're saying is that it is a prerequisite to think of others before we hope to achieve the Millennium Development Goals.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I wish you wouldn't mention Millennium Development Goals, because Philip, didn't even know what they were when I was on air with Philip Adams, and he said, "Paul, what do you think of the Millennium Development Goals?" And I thought, God, what are they, you know? And, well, I said, "Oh, Paul."
You haven't been reading all the emails I've sent you for several months.
No, I'm very sorry, Jenny. Look, of course, people working in the area of health, of anyone who is working to support others, to improve the environment, to come to grips with the kind of population pressure problems that we face, of course, I see that as part of people working in a selfless way for others. And I certainly don't think for one moment that selflessness is confined to the churches. I mean, some of the stupidest and most selfish people I've met are Christians, God help me, and some of the most generous and outgoing and good, thoroughly good, are not. So it's nothing to do with where you are in society, but I mean, we've really got to start, I think, to challenge some of these things. And one of the best ways of challenging things like self-absorption, which riddles our society, is to make fun of it. And I make it partly my business to make fun of it, because you will never really discover yourself by exploring yourself. You will discover yourself by exploring the world around you, by meeting other human beings, by talking to people who disagree with you, by arguing and engaging with others. And then the amazing thing is you discover whole parts of yourself that 10 years of counselling would not bring you to. And you discover it much faster and much cheaper talking to other people.
Sandra Kank. Paul, I think you're very much aware the Catholic Church took a bucketing yesterday, and I think that showed up very strongly in Maggie Kenyon's presentation.
Yes, Maggie has been to confession already.
I am reliably informed that somewhere in my 14 years in Parliament there's a statement on Hansard where I say that the Pope is the most evil man in the world. And if I did so, I did it from a sense of anger about women being condemned to have children that they can't keep alive, to the point where, of course, they actually die in childbirth, where we condemn children to be brought forth in poverty, to die of malnutrition and so on. So I think, for me, the question I have of you is what to do about the Catholic Church.
It's been a question I've asked myself on the odd occasion. Well, some of us who are still, I mean, I'm still a good Catholic boy, and I go to Mass every Sunday, and I'm not kidding, I'm still a completely committed Catholic and intend to die that way. I can see the strengths of the Catholic Church, and as a church historian, I can tell you more of its weaknesses than you know. The question that you ask is an absolutely serious one. I can understand why you would be angry, and many of us are also angry. And that is especially true, not in Australia, where Catholic fertility is just slightly lower at the present moment than general fertility, and Catholic fertility in Australia historically, again it's in the new book, is only really about 0.5% higher. The mix have not always been having lots of children in Australia. I mean, everybody had lots of children in previous generations. But Australia's not the problem. The real problem is in the developing world, where, exactly as Maggie said quite correctly yesterday, the situation is scandalous. And I don't, for one moment, attempt to defend it. But I would say that there are an enormous number of people within the Catholic system and within the Catholic Church who know exactly what the problem is, who agree with you completely. We would be, in Australia, by far the majority, by 90% of Catholics would agree with you. But we are dealing with, and George would be very aware of this, he luckily comes from a church with a synodal form of government which has its strengths and its weaknesses, but to my mind it has more strengths than weaknesses. We still have an absolute monarchy. And it is very difficult to penetrate that absolute monarchy. And the only thing that we can do is continue to emphasise that people form their own conscience on these issues, and that we try to make sure that especially those who have influence in developing countries are able to help people form their own conscience. But you've also got to allow, and I say this in defence of the Church in a way, that much of this is also rooted in culture. We had a list on the board yesterday which named, again, it might have been in Will Steffen's talk, which named the elements that go to make up influences about, for instance, family planning. And religion was one of them for sure, but there's a whole range of others, of which, male dominance, lack of education, and freedom for women to make up their own minds about fertility and so on and so forth. They're all part of it as well. So while, yes, I cop it, you're quite correct, that it is a scandal, and I've said this publicly in Catholic forums. I'm not being brave because I know you all agree with me. I've said this in front of bishops. Terrible bishops, not good ones. Terrible bishops. George Pell, he knows. George knows what I think. And I will say it again, yes, it is a scandal, but some of us are trying to do something about it.